Hello, my name is Jacob Lesbrons and welcome to my class project for class ET 346 Electrical Power Systems. Our first topic of discussion is, are EMFs from power lines a danger to our health? To understand this, we need to know what is an EMF. Well, part of that is an electric field, which is produced by a voltage, which is the pressure that pushes the electron through a conductor. As voltage increases, the electric field increases in strength. Electric fields can easily be shielded or weakened by conducting objects like buildings and trees. And it's measured in volts per meter. And you can look at it this way. Here we have a simple circuit with a power source and a switch and an output. And the output in this case is a light bulb. And so we have the power source that's on and the switch that's open. In this line here, a difference of potential is across the switch. So we would get a electric field on this line right here. And then there's also magnetic fields, which is produced by current flow, and those are not easily shielded or weakened, unlike electric fields, and they're measured in Teslas. So we have a voltage, or we have a power source that's on, and the switch is closed in this case, so now we have a current flow. So magnetic fields are produced by the flow of current. Here's another good representation of electric fields and magnetic fields, and you can just get a little bit better understanding, and I thought this was a good image to share. So the combination of an electric field and a magnetic field is called an EMF, or an electromagnetic field. These invisible areas of energy are also referred to as radiation. And both electric fields and magnetic fields, both of their strength decreases significantly with increasing the distance from the source. So we have a little illustration here showing that. So are EMFs dangerous? Well, you can break it down into two different types of radiation. There's non-ionizing radiation and ionizing radiation. The lower to mid-level frequency EMFs are considered non-ionizing radiation. Higher frequency level EMFs are considered ionizing radiation. So the non-ionizing radiation with the lower frequency is considered generally safe, and the ionizing radiation can damage DNA and cells directly. So here are some examples. Non-ionizing radiation, magnetic fields from electric power lines and appliances, radio waves, microwaves, visible light, and infrared radiation, and these are all known to be generally safe. And on the other hand, we have the ionizing radiation, and these include X-rays, gamma rays, radioactive decay, and high energy UV rays. So are EMFs from electric power lines dangerous? EMFs from electric power lines are considered extremely low frequency non-ionizing radiation, which is considered generally safe. So ELF EMFs. The official safety limit for power line fields is 100 microteslas. For comparison purposes, a large power line 100 feet away from a building might create a field of about 0.4 microteslas. The Earth's natural magnetic field ranges from about 30 to 60 microteslas. And here are some studies of the effects of EMFs on humans. So in children, there has been some concerns that high EMF exposure could raise the risk of certain types of cancers. so childhood leukemia and brain tumors. These concerns began to arise after a 1979 study found a potential link between childhood leukemia and living near electric power lines. Since the 1979 study, there's been thousands of studies on the effects of EMFs from power lines and potential health risks. According to statistics from the CDC, 1 in every 20,000 American children will be at risk of getting leukemia. Living within a proximity to a power line, researchers agreed that might raise the risk to about 2 of 20,000 American children. However, it might not. After 30 years of studies, researchers have not come to any clear evidence that extremely low EMFs from power lines do anything to our health, let alone cause cancer. Although the research is considered inconclusive, it is also reassuring, and the fields from power lines are not a major public health threat. That's a quote by John E. Mulder. He's the director of radiation biology, Medical College of Wisconsin. Here are some of my references, and this will be part 2 of my project, and I decided to do mine on the 2021 Texas power crisis. So earlier this year, major winter storms swept across the Central Plains, setting record low temperatures throughout the country. These winter storms had the greatest impact on Texas, which ultimately led to statewide power outages, shortages of food, water, and heat. So let's get a little overview. So production, transmission, and consumption of electricity is all done instantly on the power grid. Managing this requires a lot of people, corporations, and machines working together to achieve a stable and reliable source of power for consumers. Interconnection, which allows electricity to flow between grids, helps achieve higher efficiency and reliability of electricity supply. Unlike most of the United States, Texas has its own interconnection separate from the rest of them that covers a majority of the state. Matching the supply and demand throughout the power grid is essential for frequency matching. During off-peak hours, it is important for generators to shut down to match the demand, otherwise the frequency of the AC electricity will drop below 60 Hz. This is a significant problem because every generator on the power grid is magnetically coupled together. If parts of the grid are not synchronized, systems can be damaged. This is why a majority of the grid uses breakers that monitor frequency. These breakers can isolate equipment and save them from being damaged. Starting up a generation facility after a shutdown is a complex process, and it's also called a black start. This is why matching supply and demand to achieve a stable frequency is essential for managing the power grid. As power plants kept failing, the frequency of the grid began to drop, which would trip even more plants, and so on and so forth. And the company in charge of overseeing the grid and managing these processes is called ERCOT, the Electrical Reliability Council of Texas. So how did this happen? Historically low temperatures and harsh winter storms wreaked havoc on the Texas power grid, causing machines in electrical power generation and distribution to freeze and shut down. Failure to properly winterize machines. Low temperatures created a higher demand for electricity due to the general public using more power to stay warm. Because machines were not properly winterized and kept failing, the supply could not meet the increasing demand for electricity during freezing temperatures. The Texas power grid could not receive power from other interconnections outside of the state. So the majority of generation capacity and the fuel types that failed were natural gas and wind, which makes up roughly 69% of all of Texas's electrical generation. Wind turbines failed due to icing, and natural gas lines and wells failed due to freezing temperatures, mostly because gas lines contain water vapor that can freeze by itself pretty easily. Between these two, natural gas had a higher failure rate than wind generation in the frigid temperatures. Also, it's worth noting that the prices of natural gas went through the roof because of the extremely high demand, roughly 100 times the standard price. Plants could barely afford to keep running. But natural gas and wind generation facilities were not the only ones who failed because of the storm. Solar panels were covered with snow and ice, and nuclear plants failed because of cold water problems with their water supply. The entire interconnection was not prepared or built for a storm of this magnitude. That's not to say it is impossible for it to work efficiently and effectively, because for the most part it has, but the Texas interconnection will need more regulations and practices from some of the Midwest facilities that are designed to handle the cold. In fact, the Texas interconnection has measures in place for plants to perform under extreme heat throughout the year. I think by prioritizing proper winterization of the machines and facilities will pay dividends in the long run. Sure, it is more expensive and labor intensive up front, but in the long run it will be worth it. Another thing that could be helpful in avoiding another crisis would be to unite the Texas interconnection with the other ones, which is a lot easier said than done, but also could be necessary in avoiding catastrophe. Impact on the general public. The impact the Texas power crisis had on the general public was significant and even deadly. Fortunately, though, critical parts of the grid that are important for human health and safety, like hospitals, were prioritized, and these facilities remained up and running. People struggled to get clean water, some resorting to boiling snow to drink and had to live off of whatever they had in the house. Businesses, stores, restaurants, all were shut down due to prolonged periods of no power. Most of the general public had to use propane heaters, generators, and fires to stay warm in the frigid temperatures. There was a limited amount of facilities with heat that people would go to stay warm and get out of the cold. And I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'll go through them again. So what can be done? Implement more regulations. Put more regulations in place to ensure proper winterization of machines is done properly and effectively. A united grid is a stronger grid. With Texas having its own interconnection covering most of the state, without the safety net of other interconnections or grids supporting to supply power when demand is too high. You can see why this is inconvenient when push comes to shove. Uniting the Texas interconnection with other grids is a tall task, but nothing short of necessary. Look to the north. Implement more practices that grids in colder weather locations use. Some of these include proper insulation, heated pipes, and crushers to break up frozen coal. These precautions, among others, are why places in the Midwest, like Wisconsin, have less problems in colder months. So the blueprint is there for Texas and ERCOT to take action and prevent this from happening again. These are my references. And thank you for listening to this presentation, and I hope you all have a very nice day.